patrolling the streets. Now we're facing the possibility of permanent changes to our local criminal justice system. And these changes are not being made by DC residents or our elected officials, but the changes are being made by the White House and by Congress. This matters because it changes how we and our children are policed, prosecuted, and punished. It also raises deep questions about democracy, autonomy, and safety in a city that does not have all of the benefits and privileges of the other 50 states that make up this great nation. The consequences are real. We're seeing over-policing, more traffic stops, and heavy-handed enforcement in communities that already feel targeted, people being pulled out of their cars by unmarked masked agents. In fact, just 11 days ago, a gentleman named Phil Brown was pulled over in a traffic stop on Benning Road by Homeland Security and MPD, and he was shot at 3 times by a Homeland Security agent. His lawyers have no information on the officers that were involved in that traffic stop, including MPD. And the MPD incident report, and this was the most alarming part about it, the incident report omitted any mention of gunshots being fired at Mr. Brown. And so MPD has responded to that by saying that they would ordinarily release body-worn camera footage, but they won't because an MPD officer was not involved in the shooting. It was a federal agent. It's situations like this that make DC feel like a city under siege. We also have a stressed out court system. Judges and public defenders are burning out, working until 1 and 2 a.m. to process cases that used to be resolved with citations or cashless bail. Some lawyers also fear that they cannot effectively serve their clients under these unrelenting circumstances. Also, we have disempowered residents. DC locals feel powerless, angry, confused, and vulnerable because decisions are being made about us, not with us. Tonight is about asking hard questions. What does the federal occupation mean for DC's future, for our courts, our safety, and our nation? We'll hear from voices across the legal, advocacy, and judicial sectors who are living this crisis every day while serving DC residents at the same time. I'm now going to introduce our panel. First, the Honorable Milton C. Lee, Jr. Judge Lee is the Chief Judge of the Superior Court for the District of Columbia. He was appointed by President Obama in 2010, and he was appointed to be our chief last year in 2024. Chief Judge Lee, I welcome you. It's great to see you. Next on the panel, Attorney Alexis Morgan Gardner. She is an assistant federal public defender in Washington, D.C., representing indigent clients and advocating for justice reform. She also represented attorney Paul Bryant, whose arrest went viral after he was charged with threatening to kidnap a federal officer. Attorney Gardner, welcome. Next, we have Michael Perloff, senior staff attorney at the ACLU of D.C. That organization is focused on racial justice, police misconduct, and civil liberties. Attorney Perloff, good evening. Last but certainly not least, we have Russell Ellis, also known as Jolly Good Ginger. He is an activist, political commentator, veteran advocate, advocating for racial reconciliation and police accountability. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention that we have 2 judges also with Chief Judge Lee, Judge Dason and Judge Brandt, who are from the criminal division, who will be chiming in to answer questions as we go throughout the evening. So I welcome all of you. Thank you. And thank you to our judges and our other panelists. It's good to see you all. Question number 1. This is directed to Michael Perloff and Alexis Gardner. Over the last 2 months, we've seen an increase in unmasked federal agents conducting stops and arrests across DC. often without clear identification. So name badges, no, people just don't know who's stopping them. Why should residents be concerned about this? And what are the constitutional or civil rights implications when enforcement lacks transparency or accountability?
I'd be happy to start. Well, for one, it's a real safety concern, right? If people do not have a badge, a name, we can't tell what entity they're a part of. I mean, it's a crime that's actually more common than people know. People pretend to be police and rob people for their stuff, assault them, rape them. So just that practical implication by itself. But more fundamentally, transparency is at the heart of democracy, right? And the Constitution requires that you have a reason why you're stopping someone. We know who you are stopping them, and we know what entity you're representing. If we don't know that, then how can we even challenge any misconduct? And that goes to the point that you brought up in your opening, right? There's a man that was shot at, and we can't even figure out what federal officer shot at him. It's I mean, it makes me speechless because it's so far from what this country was built upon. And without that, obviously, there's already a lot of profiling and abuse of power happening without that. But now it just makes it that much easier. And there's no way to address the misconduct.
Thank you, Mr. Perloff. What about the constitutional or civil rights implications when you can't identify an officer who's violated your rights?
Well, I agree with all of that, and I think there's a host of different consequences. To me, the most fundamental are the consequences for our ability to protest. And this may seem indirect, but it actually is quite built into this type of policing. So at a most explicit level, we have people who are arrested for their protest, arrested for their speech. I'm currently representing an individual who was walking behind some National Guard members and playing the Imperial March theme from Star Wars and was arrested for that. That should not happen in this country. And we see other situations like that too, where people are arrested and or beat up because they've been trying to protest. And so these types of incidents, combined with the general presence of armed law enforcement in military fatigues, wearing masks in some cases, to create a sense that if you speak, if you criticize the government, you may be put in handcuffs. You may be beaten up. You may lose out on economic opportunities. And that is antithetical to the sort of vibrant discourse that democracy depends on. So, from your basic just physical safety all the way to the broader principles of free speech and liberty that I think a lot of us view as core to what America is all about, all of this is put at risk when you have the type of militarized law enforcement that we're seeing.
I mean, I want to ask so many more questions just on that, but I've got to move on. But I'll be back to both of you momentarily. Thank you for this information. My next question, Chief Judge Lee, I have a question for you. Since the federal takeover began, arrests for low-level offenses. My light just went off, you guys. Arrests for low-level offenses have surged. Can you speak to how this influx of cases has affected the court system?
Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for having us once again. Part of this, I'm going to rely on Judge Brandt and Judge Dason to answer. They're the presiding and deputy presiding judge of the criminal division. Just in terms of a very broad look at this, arrest number is certainly up. They were up during the surge. They continue to remain up. For the Superior Court, part of the difficulty in just managing the raw numbers is the unprecedented number of judicial vacancies that we are facing. So when we get to January of 2026, we will have 15 vacancies on the Superior Court. Almost 25% of the judicial seats will be vacant. So when we have an influx of cases, it makes it a little harder for us to manage the number there. The judges and I, we looked very carefully at what was coming in during the surge and what's been coming in since that time period as well. And I think you can take away some very broad strokes from that. Obviously, people in the District of Columbia had more contact with law enforcement than what we traditionally see. So if you looked at what was coming into our arraignment and presentment courtroom where people make their first appearances, you saw a lot of people who had bench warrant cases where they had failed to appear at some point. A lot of cases for fugitives, people who are wanted from other jurisdictions. We certainly saw a pretty significant influx of what we refer to as lower level misdemeanor cases. So cases like fare evasion, unlawful possession of or use of marijuana in public, the possession of an open container of alcohol, a few cases of gambling and so forth. Those cases really started pouring in. In terms of the more serious crimes, we saw about what we typically see each day on our lockup list. No significant difference, except for one area, and I think that is we saw an influx of gun cases, gun possession cases coming in. It was just the raw numbers that were significantly higher than before. I think Judge Dason, Judge Brandt can give you a much better idea about kind of the quality of what was coming in. It does, in the end, put us in a position where we have to set cases out further than we would normally do to manage the number of cases that are coming in all at one time. But Judge Brandt, Judge Dason, please, I want you to add in, follow up because you're on the front lines.
No, thank you for that, Chief. I think what I want to hone in on is something at a more micro level, because the increase of cases coming into the system off of the lockup list means that our arraignment court is running later than it usually does. It also means that there's been what I would classify as a significant increase in number of new cases on our misdemeanor calendars and our general felony calendars, the gun cases of that sort. Something that I want to make sure we don't miss out on mentioning is the just general increase in cases coming into the system is creating an increased caseload on our defense attorneys.
Yeah, that was going to be my follow-up question. For those of you who just joined, Judge Rainey Brandt and Judge Dana Dason are here from the criminal division, and the chief judge asked them to join so they could speak directly to what they're seeing every day as more and more DC residents are being arrested and held. And this may go to some questions about cashless bail. We'll see where this goes. But the impact on lawyers. I have had conversations with lawyers who are taking on cases. And for those of you who may not know, if you cannot afford a lawyer in the criminal justice system in the district, one is appointed. And there are a lot with the increased number of arrests, then lawyers get more cases. And so lawyers have expressed concerns about the size of their caseload and whether or not they can effectively represent people. So what are you all hearing, Judge Dason and Judge Brandt, as to that?
Well, I'll start with the obvious. Everyone is stretched beyond their limits right now. And I think with that increase of cases on individual lawyers' caseloads, you're seeing, as the chief mentioned, some cases are having to be set out further just because of, you can only do so much in a 12 to 15 hour day. I'm leaving some room there because people have got to eat and people have got to sleep.
So Judge Brandt, just so people understand what you mean, when cases are set out further, what are the implications for the person who's arrested? Are they staying in jail? Like, what are the implications for the person who's arrested if they're?
It depends on the type of charge. At the misdemeanor level, dependent on what information is brought before the court, people are some people are released, some people are detained. So whichever bucket you fall into, if your next court date is 3 weeks out, a month out, because each one of our misdemeanor calendars carries, and don't hold me to this because this is an approximation. No one's done any data research. Our judges on at the misdemeanor level are carrying calendars that are anywhere from 6 to 1,000 cases deep on our traffic calendars.
Wow. Okay. Wow. That's a lot. We're going to come back to that. Judge Lee and Attorney Gardner, this question is directed towards you. But we've heard reports that our local judges and staff and our public defender service, not just federal, but our local public defender service, have gone unpaid due to the federal shutdown. Yet they're still expected to report to work because you all are considered essential employees. How is that affecting justice delivery from your perspective?
Ms. Gardner, how about if I let you get started?
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Well, and this is very personal to me because I'm currently not being paid, right? And I'm supposed to make decisions about someone else's liberty and life, and I'm worried about paying my mortgage and my childcare next week. And so, I mean, obviously law can't function based on unpaid labor, and no one should be expected to work and not be paid. Those times are behind us, or so I thought. But it obviously some people are not coming to work, but a lot of the public defenders, judges, probation officers, court staff, all these public servants, many of them are coming, even though they're not being paid because of, their dedication to justice and their love of the community. But it does slow down the process. And justice delayed is justice denied, right? And not only that, but with our jury trials, we have funds, right, that we use to pay experts to testify on behalf of our clients, but we don't have the money right now. So for instance, I have a client who I know is factually innocent, but he's on home incarceration right now. And we were scheduled to go to trial next month, but our expert, we don't have the money to pay her, so she's not going to testify for us. So we had to push out the trial. And now he'll be on home incarceration for 5 more months. And this is a man who is presumed innocent under the law, but who's factually innocent, I know, and will be acquitted when we eventually get to jury trial. And he missed his uncle's funeral last week because the judge wouldn't let him go because he's on home incarceration. So, he would be able to have this behind him next month, but because we can't pay our expert, we could go forward without our expert, but then, he's not getting the A+ defense that he deserves, the zealous defense. So it's affecting everybody. And obviously his family members and, the people who want to see him at that funeral, or people who, are on home incarceration, so they can't go back to their job, and how they feed their families. So it's affecting everyone tremendously. And it's slowing down the courts.
Chief Judge Lee?
So in the Superior Court and our Court of Appeals, almost all of the employees are essential workers. So 83% of our roughly 1,182 employees in the Superior Court, they come to work every day and they continue to work. Court of Appeals is 85% of their staff works. We honestly do not have the ability to simply slow down the wheels of justice on our end. We just have to keep plugging along. But it has impacts because it's not just the public defenders. They're struggling as well. They rely on federal funding for all the things like investigations, experts, and so forth. That applies to the Superior Court just as well. It applies to all of the staff that works in all the other agencies that support the justice machine, pretrial services, workers, our local and our federal partners at CSOSA, Marshals Service. Every piece of the justice apparatus right now does not have funding to operate, yet the expectation is that we will continue to operate. And it's important that everyone understands the Superior Court is open for business. It will remain open for business, but it does have an impact on morale, people on the front lines that have to do the work. It has an impact on the people that we have to serve, the citizens of the District of Columbia. I try to remind our staff here every day that there are people who are coming in who are literally sacrificing, like our jurors, who are not getting paid during this time period, and they have demonstrated a commitment to the process. And so we have to keep chugging along as best we can, but everyone has to understand that the absence of funding from October to 1, it has an impact on operations, both short term and long term. And the longer we go, the more difficult it is to rebound from some of those consequences. And for some people, the consequences are much greater than simply having more difficulty making ends meet. There are people who are incarcerated who might find themselves in a situation where things just don't work as smoothly for them as we traditionally see. Those are important considerations, and they should not go unnoticed. We provide a lot of service to a lot of people in the criminal justice system. Those folks right now are not going to get the same level of service when there's a lapse of funding to all the service providers.
Judge Lee, just as a kind of a side note on this, are the cafeteria staff and cleaning staff, are they also not getting paid?
We got to keep the building clean, so they do have to come to work. We do have to try to feed folks as best we can when they come. And so most of those folks that work in Superior Court, they're on a contract. They don't get paid either, because it's not just a government shutdown. We got to a new fiscal year on October 1. That means there's no influx of new money coming in. So existing contracts don't get paid. We can't enter into new contracts as well. And then judges, staff, every sector that has a federal contribution to their budget, they aren't able to pay bills at this time.
Okay, wow, that's thank you for that. That was a question that I had in my mind about whether or not that's happening. Thank God you all let lawyers bring snacks in for trial anyway in that courthouse. So I won't go hungry. Just keep some snacks in my pocket. But thank you for answering that, Chief Judge. Next question is for Jolly Good Ginger. Jolly, and I want to raise this question, but I also want to use the Phil Brown case that I mentioned as an example. So Phil Brown is a gentleman that was recently shot at by feds in a routine traffic stop, unarmed man. He was pulled over for having tinted windows. That was it. And got shot at 3 times. 2 bullets hit the passenger side. Thankfully, he's still living. Charges were dropped. Activists are calling on the mayor to end MPD's working relationship with federal agents. Apparently, there's some cooperation between MPD and the federal agents. And they're citing this case as an example. And they're also asking Councilmember Brooke Pinto, who chairs the Public Safety Committee, also to look into the matter. And so far, the mayor hasn't commented on this incident. And Brooke Pinto, we invited her here tonight, but she had a conflict. So as an activist, somebody who's on the ground, what are you hearing from communities who are being directly affected by this type of violence and violation of civil rights? What are you hearing? And then I want you to, there's another question. I'm asking you a compound question, which I would get objected to if I were in trial, but I'm not in trial right now. I want to know how DC residents can make their voices heard and push back.
Well, I appreciate you having me here. Free DC, DC statehood now. So I talk to a lot of people in DC on a regular basis, and I'm gonna tell you the number one thing I hear from them is that they feel terrorized. People are afraid to let their children walk to school alone. People are afraid to, just be out and about like they normally do. I talk to business owners who have seen their businesses, you know, their business been cut in half in some cases, if not more. Some people are being forced to close. I mean, this is not normal. And what's happening is, and as we've heard the judges and attorneys speak so far, the influx of cases is a direct result of this influx of over policing. Not that over policing didn't already exist. We could have a whole town hall just on that. But now we're seeing it even worse. You're seeing, we were just out in the Northeast side just a couple weeks ago, and we witnessed, me and my couple guys with me witnessed a couple of federal agents walk up to a guy and question him. They were literally just fishing. We informed that guy, hey, don't answer their questions. You don't have to. And so he didn't. And so they left him alone. We followed his federal agents around the block and they found another woman to harass, ended up arresting her, cordoning off the entire block. Over 60 police officers from 4 different agencies came out to search a car because it allegedly had drugs in it. They found nothing. And we notified Harriet's Wildest Dreams, the organization here in DC that does court watch. We notified them to watch her court. And from what we understand, I mean, those charges against her are going to be dropped, but she was already arrested, already taken, down to District 3, already this, already that. And they're out fishing. And so this is communities that are literally being terrorized. And not to mention, while all that was happening, there was other residents standing around. Hey, I got to go pick up my kid. I got to get my car. I got to go do this. I got to go cook dinner. I got to do this. I mean, they're literally just interrupting people's lives to be fishing for crimes that, as you've already mentioned, are generally nothing. These cases wouldn't even make it to trial in most cases, or they might just be thrown out right away. Also, I think it's worth mentioning. You said that DC is like the proven ground. I think you're right. I've been to Chicago in this last few weeks, and I've been to Memphis, and they're seeing the same exact thing. Like, so what's working in DC for them, not for DC, but what's working for the federal government, they're doing it in Memphis. They're doing it in Chicago. They're terrorizing these neighborhoods. They're ramping up charges so that so they can get on TV and say, look at all these arrests we got. But the other side of that story, which the chief and the other judges and yourself have already mentioned, the other side of that story, these these cases being pushed out, these cases being dropped, these cases not having ample evidence, that part's not being told. So what people are believing is that there must have been a lot of crime in DC because look at all these arrests, and they're erroneous arrests. So the second part of your question, what can residents do? This is what I encourage people to do. Always film the police. If they're out and about, pull your phone out, film them, and post it on social media. People like myself will blast it out, and I make it a habit of I film them and I show what they're doing. And I have found that to be very effective. They don't want to be exposed for what they're really doing, which is next to nothing. And I think it's worth mentioning real quick, the National Guard doesn't have a purpose here. The National Guard doesn't have any law enforcement authority beyond what a regular citizen would have. If I witnessed a crime, could I detain someone until the police got there? Suppose I could if it was a crime where somebody's was in bodily harm. That's all the National Guard can do. They're here for looks. So I encourage residents not to normalize that. Let's not take pictures with them. Let's not give them a task to do. I was in another ward the other day where it's like, hey, they're already here. What if we just make them pick up trash? No, don't justify the existence because all you're doing is normalizing their existence. And so this is just terrorizing neighborhoods. The short answer of that. And I think that residents should speak out, should film it when they see it, post it on social media, and not normalize it to any degree.
Yeah, thank you. Such a loaded question and a great answer to package in like 30 seconds. I now want to pose this question to the entire panel, including you, Jolly. We're talking about federal intervention and measures. So if these measures are permanent, the National Guard deployment, the feds everywhere, when MPD pulls up, U.S. Customs and Border Patrol, Homeland Security, routine traffic stops. What long-term consequences do you all foresee from where you sit? What long-term consequences do you foresee for the rule of law and police accountability and statehood for DC?
I'll start if it's okay, but like I think that we're just going to be normalizing. So these a lot of these federal agents, and I'm specifically speaking about ICE when I say this, they're wearing military uniforms with police across the front, but they're neither military trained nor police trained. They're not following the rules of police. They're not identifying themselves. None of the things that we expect law enforcement to do. These federal agents, let's be honest, the FBI is not trained to be out doing foot patrols. That's not the FBI's function. That's not a lot of these federal agencies' function. So they're doing things that they're just simply untrained to do. And because this administration is so headset on giving them the immunity to do whatever it takes, then what we're seeing is years and years and years of people fighting, civil rights activists. The jurisprudence has been put in place to govern police and to govern how we do things, just being shattered in front of us. We're going to get to a point where the police are and federal agents are allowed to do whatever they want. And then you guys, the judges, they're just stuck filtering through trash. And so I think that the sooner we stop this, that it doesn't become normal, the more we can clean up what the mess that's already been made.
Thank you. Somebody else want to follow behind? Teachers League?
We're in the business of resolving cases, and we are actually very good at it. We have the best judges that you will find anywhere. Our staff is just incredible. And it shows every single day in the way that we try to provide service to people beyond just case resolution. Part of what you'll see from Superior Court is strong. It'll continue to be strong. We will do, and we will do, and we will do. We will not crumble under this pressure. Our folks will meet the demands of what is brought to us. I have the utmost confidence in Judge Brandt and Judge Dason running the criminal division, and we will continue to run it well.
Alexis, do you have something?
Yeah, well, I think back to what Jolly said is what used to be intolerable is now becoming tolerable and commonplace. And I mean, I feel like certain communities are already used to the police violating their rights and going on fishing expeditions. And it's now just more rampant than it has ever been. I think if we keep continuing this trend is not looking good for DC and self-determination. And I think power is supposed to start from the bottom up, right? But now it's being forced upon us. And so it's not a government of consent, it's one of control. And that's not what America's founded on.
Thank you. Anyone? Go ahead.
I'll just add, I share many of the concerns that Jolly and Alexis raised, but I also think about the various moments in American history and in world history where there have been extreme pressures on a set of norms and values and an idea of government, democratic government, liberties. And there have been many times where people have found in the face of truly horrific oppression, deeper commitment to the values that are under attack, deeper commitment to democracy, deeper commitment to freedom, deeper commitment to equality. And I think that we often take for granted the idea of a free society. And so as we start to see it slipping away from us, we're forced to remind ourselves of how valuable that is and make a choice. Is this something that's important enough to us as a people to fight for, to advocate for, to go into the streets for? And I think that that's a core question that we're at as we see greater incursions into our liberty. And I like to think that just as past generations of Americans, of advocates have responded to very difficult moments, in some cases more difficult moments than we're facing with great courage. Our generation will do the same.
So I was at Ron Brown High School yesterday, speaking with Judge Ezekiel Ross from D.C. Superior Court. He sits on our civil division. And the students, Ron Brown, for those of you who don't know, Ron Brown High School is an all-male school here in the District of Columbia. It's run by Dr. Courtney Gibbs, and it's an awesome environment. And so every month they've started these Know Your Rights trainings because a lot of their students are being stopped by federal agents and NPD, especially after the surge. So I want to ask some questions, and I guess I'll pose this to attorneys Gardner and Perloff about what people's rights are when they're stopped by a federal agent. So one question that I was asked yesterday was, do I have to answer questions from a federal agent if I'm stopped? And my gut reaction, my gut, answer to that is, sweetheart, answer any questions that they're asking you. But people actually want to know what their rights are in a given scenario. So I guess I'll start with Attorney Perloff, and then you can riff off, Attorney Gardner, you can riff off of him and back and forth. But do I have to answer questions when I'm stopped?
You don't have to answer questions when you're stopped. You have a constitutional right to remain silent and refuse to answer questions. There's a narrow exception to that rule in DC law that exists for certain types of pedestrian or traffic offenses where you have to give your name and address if you're asked. But otherwise, the Constitution is very clear about your ability to refuse to answer. Now, there also is a slight other exception that I'll just share, which comes with showing papers. So, if you're a non-citizen, there are circumstances where the law requires you to carry papers and show them if an immigration official asks for them. And if you're driving, you have to show your license. If you're vending, you've got to show your license. But those are the exceptions to the rule. Outside of those types of limited circumstances, you don't have to show ID, you don't have to answer questions. If you choose not to, that might extend the time that you're detained. It's possible that will extend the time, but it's also possible that you'll avoid saying something that will cause you to be arrested or cause there to be a confusion about whether you've done something wrong. So, that's a choice people can make, obviously, but from a legal standpoint, outside of those limited circumstances I spoke about, you have a right to remain silent.
Attorney Gardner, do you have anything to add?
Well, not only do you have the right, but it's absolutely necessary you do so. Aside from asking them a question, if you're asked a question, your only question you should ask is, am I free to go? Am I free to go? So you never answer, just return that question. And if they say yes, then calmly walk away. If they say no, well, then now you're being detained. And so it's even more important that you maintain your right to remain silent. However, you do have to give your name. But if they ask you any further questions, I am exercising my right to remain silent, and I want a lawyer. I'm silent and I want a lawyer. That's all you should ever say. But I understand your point about being safe, right? Like as a Black mom to a Black son, it's safety first. We worry about your rights later, right? And so you always want to be polite and calm, even when you're being mistreated, right? And sometimes they're not just going to give you a yes or no answer. It's so clear. Are you being stopped or are you being detained and arrested? Maybe they're just like, I'm asking the questions here, and they just reassert their question, or they tell you to shut the F up. Again, it's always in your best interest to be calm, be rational, and just, am I free to go? No. Okay. Then I'm being detained, and sit there, exercise your right to a lawyer.
So my next follow-up to that is the difference between being stopped and being arrested. So let's switch the scenario to if I'm arrested. Do I have to answer questions?
The only question you have to answer is your name. Don't give a false name. I mean, you can just say, I'm going to remain silent and I want a lawyer. Never give a false name. That's another crime, right? Even if you didn't do anything wrong in the first place, now you're going to catch a new case for lying about your name.
Yeah.
So never lie to the police. Don't say anything. You don't have to. And your rights are just so much more important because anything you say can and will be used against you. Whether you say, I didn't do anything, you say, you give an excuse about, oh, that's someone else's, whatever it is. It's never been helpful for my clients, for their cases, for justice, for them to waive their rights. And I think, people are like, well, they didn't even read my Miranda rights to me. A lot of times they don't have to. There's certain situations when they're trying to interrogate you, right? When they're eliciting incriminating information, they have to read you your rights. But don't think because they didn't read you your rights, then, well, you can say whatever and it's not going to be used against you. Everything will always be used against you, whether you were read your rights or not. I mean, potentially, right, there's legal mechanisms for us to get your statement thrown out later, but in the moment, remain silent.
And let me just build on what Alexis is saying there. Once you are arrested, it's not it's not enough just to be silent. You need to actually say, I'm invoking my right to remain silent and I want to speak with a lawyer. Because if you just are silent, the police can continue to badger you with questions. So if you want to get the full benefit of these rights, you have to actually say, I'm invoking my right to remain silent. I want to speak with a lawyer. And you need to use pretty much that exact language. There's some really unfortunate court decisions where people have said things that are a little bit different. One really awful case where someone said, I want to speak to a lawyer, dog. And the Fifth Circuit, I think it was the Fifth Circuit, said, well, he wasn't asking to speak with a lawyer. An officer would have thought he wanted to speak with a lawyer, dog. And that's obviously like an incredibly offensive decision on multiple levels. But it shows how you really need to use um, pretty much these exact words in this specific case that Alexis was saying. I want to remain silent. I want to speak with a lawyer. And if you say that and then you stop talking, stop answering questions, you'll end up preserving your rights to the greatest extent possible.
So I want to ask this question, then we're going to go back to the entire panel. Using the Phil Brown example. This question is, what if I'm treated badly by a federal officer? This man was shot at, right, during a traffic stop. Thank God he's alive. But there's no, the MPD incident report, for those of you that don't know what an incident report is, whenever someone's arrested, whenever there's a use of force, MPD is required to document that in what's called an incident report. The incident report does not mention anything about this or the name of that officer. To date, his lawyers do not know who this person is. And so I know this answer could be dicey because of the way I'm asking the question. But if I'm treated badly by a Fed, and best case scenario, I know the person's name, they were wearing a badge. What can I do? Then I want to go to the worst case scenario, which is the Phil Brown scenario. So let's start with the best case scenario, Michael Perloff.
Well, even when you have all the information about an officer, your ability to seek compensation from federal law enforcement is unfortunately relatively limited. The major legal tool that exists for that is the Federal Torts Claims Act, and that allows you to seek relief. There's a whole process, and happy to talk more about that if you have specific questions. But that does allow you to seek monetary relief for certain types of rights violations committed by federal law enforcement. It helps really just, you don't actually need to know the name of the official as long as you know the agency they worked for. That's enough to file a Federal Torts Claims Act claim. Now, if you don't know the agency, how do you do that? Well, sometimes you can try to use the Freedom of Information Act to get additional police information or reports. There may be circumstances where if MPD was involved, you can get some information from MPD in terms of their police reports. You can try to get access to MPD body-worn camera footage if you were actually captured in the footage, or if a loved one, if unfortunately if the person, if you're trying to get information from someone who unfortunately was killed by law enforcement, there is ways for their next of kin to get access to the footage. So you could use those sorts of tools to learn who was involved with the agency and file a claim. But this is once you start thinking about suing a federal official, you're getting into some more, there's some legal steps you're going to have to take. So you want to consult with a lawyer, contact a civil rights lawyer, and try to get their advice to how to proceed to get the information to file the claim.
Thank you for that. This is, for those of you who don't know, suing a federal officer in the United States is also known as Bivens litigation, and I've litigated those cases extensively, and Perloff and I have had a chance to work together on, not on litigation, but on some similar Bivens issues. So Alexis, I'd like to direct the part B of that question to you. What if the officer, I don't know who he is, no name badge, masked officer, like what can I do?
Well, so, I mean, before you get to litigation after fact, I think in the moment, just like Jolly said, it's really important to get people to record. If you're being treated by the officer, you don't want to reach for your phone and try to record them. Ideally, as soon as you see them coming up, you're pulling out your phone and recording. But telling other people in the community, hey, record this, and bearing witness for other people, because like you said, they don't want to be seen. And there's power in numbers, there's strength in numbers. So when everyone starts to crowd around and they're like, we're going to bear witness to this, and you're not going to do this in front of me or get away with it. That's really important. So documenting whatever's around as it's happening, making sure someone at least documents it. If there's any injury, immediately seeking medical treatment. That'll help with your 1983 claim later. Taking pictures, and every report matters. As a criminal defense attorney, it's so helpful when I get information. It's called PPMS on officers and their prior misconduct. And sometimes, there's 17 different reports that have been made, and most of them have been unsubstantiated, meaning, their agency said, well, it was a justified, beating or shooting or whatever. But still, 17, that sends a message. And if they did that 17 times for people who reported it, how many times has it actually been done, right? Because we know only a fraction of these abuses are reported. So make a report to the entity. Well, like you said, I guess if you don't know the entity, who are you reporting to? But also the Public Defender Service, the best in the country. I'm not tooting my own horn. I'm a federal public defender who practices in district court, not to be confused with a public defender service who practices in Superior Court, where Judge Lee is the chief judge. But they have they're keeping track of these different agencies, and they're working with the federal defenders to keep track of federal law enforcement outside of MPD, and to keep track of the numbers and different misconduct that's reported. So contacting the Public Defender Service, they're very accessible to help with that. If you're not, feeling like you can go talk to a civil lawyer, there are free resources out there for you.
And I just want to add a resource, and so this will go out to all of our attendees. The National Police Accountability Project, who's one of our co-sponsors tonight, also has a website for the public where you can obtain information about your rights when you encounter a federal agent under different circumstances. And they also have a membership directory with 550 of the best civil rights lawyers in the country, including myself. I'm on that list. So just understand that as a member of the public, there are resources out there for you. So back to the entire panel. Thank you, attorneys Perloff and Gardner. In one sentence, and actually before I do that, let me welcome Oye, our shadow representative, Oye Owolewa. He has joined us. And so I would ask Oye also to chime in on this question. In one sentence, what must DC residents understand about this moment that we're in? And what's one action that each of us can take to protect our community and our democracy? Oye, we'll start with you. Welcome. And he's also running for at-large DC Council this year. Thank you.
Absolutely. First of all, thank you for having me, being patient with me, and putting this conversation together because it's really important. Now, I've been the U.S. representative, fighting for D.C. statehood for a few years now. And when we first fought for statehood, the conversation used to begin and end with congressional voting representation. And we've seen so many aspects of our lives being impacted by not being a state, control of our National Guard, control, final say over our laws, our budget, even now our criminal justice or justice system. So, having this conversation highlights the fact that we need to continue fighting for DC statehood, not just going to Congress, but also going online like here, telling our friends in other states to support statehood, because that's how we get ownership over our own lives here. And an action item outside of talking about DC statehood is like what Jolly said earlier, having the conversation, videotaping police officers and what they're doing, but mostly having these conversations as DC residents. When people from all across the country visit DC or watch the news, they think of the White House and Congress. But this conversation and the conversations that spur from this really shows that we're 700,000 people who have our own thoughts, our own mind, and deserve to have final say over our laws, have final say over who we elect, and making sure that our lives belong to us. So I want to thank you for this conversation. More importantly, elevating these causes, because we're speaking for those who can't speak for themselves.
And we should have final say over our judges.
Yes.
Our courts. That's
Absolutely.
also under siege, but whoever wants to go next, please.
Yeah, I'll chime in really quickly. One of the things that we say to people who come to the Superior Court and the people that we serve is, it's important that you actually let us know how we're doing. It's important that when we're doing something really well, I absolutely love to hear it. So do the judges, managers, and staff. But when we're missing the mark on something and there's room for improvement, while I might not love to hear it, I actually need to hear it. I need to hear it so that we can work and to try to do better for the people who depend on us so greatly. So I can't speak for all the other agencies across the District of Columbia, whether they be our federal partners or our local partners. But I hope that they would share the same sentiment. If there are places where we just need to do better, we need to improve, then you should make your voice heard. You should let us all know about it. Sitting on sidelines does not give us the ability to hear what your concern is, to consider what you're saying, and then do our best to try to respond to it. And at least in my position, if I recognize it's not something I can do immediately, then my responsibility to the citizens of the District of Columbia is that I actually tell you that. And I try to help you understand why we have to take a course of action that we do. It's that level of engagement that is the outgrowth of engagement from members of the community.
Thank you, Chief Judge Lee. Jolly, I know you have another event right up behind this one, so I will let you go next.
Yes, ma'am. One sentence to say to residents about this moment is, we're in unprecedented times. Not every generation goes through what's happening right now. So feeling stress and anxiety and feeling unsurety and feeling unsafe by what's happening is normal. It's okay. A lot of people sometimes feel like they're the only ones feeling this way. I assure you, a lot of people are feeling how you're feeling. So please, like Oye just said, talk to each other, have community conversations. I think for a while there, when they were doing the 8 o'clock make the noise thing, there was a lot of solidarity in that, of just people not feeling like they're alone. And what action can be taken, by the community is just, I love that you said know your rights. Know your rights. Always film the police. Don't answer questions. Attorney Gardner brought that up. Please don't answer their questions. They're just fishing. They're out here just looking for stuff. So know your rights. Always from the police. Know the organizations like Harriet's Wildest Dreams, who are out here doing the work in the community, doing court watch, doing bail funds, even though cashless bail's been named for no reason, but whatever. Like doing things for the community that are helping, because I think it's going to take community and it's going to take resilience to beat this. Because right now, the Trump administration, I'm sorry, they're making it us versus them. We didn't ask for it to be this way, but here we are. And I think, everybody says DC strong. I believe DC strong. So I believe in DC.
Thank you, Dolly. Thank you very much.
And thank you for having me. I do have to go. I very much appreciate you. I respect this entire panel, all the work you're doing in the community, and I'm so glad that stuff like this is happening.
Thank you, Jelly. And we'll definitely see you in the street. You are a very, very visible protester and an activist, and we thank you for your work, especially right now. We need people like you. So thank you for coming.
Thank you as well.
God bless you. God bless you. So the last few questions are about local issues and things that are directly affecting the criminal justice system. And so I want to start with Judge Brand, Judge Dason on these. So the House recently passed the DC Crimes Act, which among other things would, if it passes the Senate as well, it would bar our mayor and our council from altering sentencing laws and curtail the ability of local judges to be more lenient with younger offenders. What are some of the implications if our elected officials cannot create laws to address public safety in their own city, or if judges aren't able to utilize their discretion in ways that they see fit based on an individualized case-by-case basis? So I'll start with Judge Brandt or Judge Dason, whichever one of you would like to start.
So I'm hearing the question and I'm not exactly sure how to answer it, because as judges, we receive the cases that we get and we apply the law to those cases. Our personal concerns or whatever can't be interjected into that decision making. So if the law, whatever the law is, becomes permanent in the district, as judges, we all have to follow it. So I'm thinking through my mind, trying to come up with a better answer for you.
I'll follow up with that. In cases where judges have discretion, though, and there are some cases where judges can depart from sentencing guidelines or, based on different factors. Is that a good thing if it's taken away, or does it not matter if it's taken away? If a judge is not able to use their discretion in cases where they may have previously been able to use their discretion in meting out an appropriate consequence for a younger offender?
So the judges can always, none of the sentencing guidelines are mandatory. And that's a creature of our case law. And so I think that to the extent that the judges now are able to either apply or not apply the guidelines, I'm not sure that's exactly what you're asking about, but I just wanted to make that clear that there are no such things as mandatory sentencing guidelines.
Well, yeah, one of the things I think is really important for people generally just to know that as judges, we just do not comment on legislation. We rarely get involved because in part we're just prohibited from doing that. But there has been the suggestion at times that DC isn't capable of legislating appropriately. Last year when I think many people across the city were concerned about the uptick in violent crime, City Council actually responded. They responded by passing Secure DC. That act was then signed by the mayor, created 14 new offenses. The statute also made it a little easier to preventively detain people in serious cases as well. And Mr. Jolly mentioned earlier about crime stats. We really prefer to dig into the data. And the data suggests to us that when you look at now versus last time this year, we have hovered roughly around 26% decrease in crime in the District of Columbia. I know there's been criticism of those numbers, but the data really is what the data is. It supports that. And when you look at the Sentencing Commission, and Judge Dason is now the chair of the Sentencing Commission, when you look at the data that's the outgrowth of that agency, and they publish a lot of information available to the public on their website. Here's what you'll actually find about sentencing in the District of Columbia. That over the last several years, easily 5 or more, sentencing in the District of Columbia on felony cases, the guideline compliance number is 95% or higher. That means that prosecutors, defense lawyers, judges recognize the value of the sentencing guidelines, and in over 95% of the cases, judges actually hit the mark. That means they exercise discretion, but they recognize the value of what data has taught us over the years. And no judge in this courthouse is afraid to look at the guidelines and say, in this instance, they just don't apply. They just should not apply. That's the type of discretion that judges should have. They can hear from prosecutors. They can hear from defense lawyers. They can hear from victims and members of the public, factor all of that in, and make the very best decision they can based on what's in front of them. And the guidelines suggest that's exactly what Superior Court judges have done historically.
No, and that's why our court is so important. And we thank you, Chief Judge Lee, for your leadership of DC Superior Court, especially now during this time. So we have one more question for the panel, and then we will go into some Q&A before we wrap up tonight. So there is a proposal to reduce the age at which young offenders can be tried as adults to the age of 14. Michael Perloff and Alexis Gardner, I think you guys also can chime in on this question. And Oye, if you still here. I don't know any data on this, but will this help reduce crime in the district if we reduce the age, from just your perspective, reducing the age, and what does research show? If we reduce the age from 16, right now, youth as young as 16 can be charged as adults for certain offenses, but there is a proposal by the federal government to reduce that age to 14. So what are the implications of that? And will that help us? Will that reduce crime?
I'd be happy to jump in on this question. Absolutely not. The research shows that it does not reduce crime. In fact, increases recidivism, right? Because young people make mistakes, lots of mistakes. I know I did. But young people also have the capacity for change, right? And when you take 14-year-olds and put them around adults who are, violent offenders, who are, still running criminal enterprises within, they're just being mentored to be harder criminals, which is going to lead to recidivism and, more violent crimes if they went in for, something. Well, obviously they're not being usually penalized as an adult if it was something more petty, but, a carjacking, then the next time they're coming in for a murder right after, they serve that sentence. And we've seen, and I know Superior Court has a restorative justice program, and I think it needs to be more prolific, and we need to not just do it for, low level offenses, because that has actually, the research shows that reduces recidivism, in turn crime, by about 1/3. And there's actually higher satisfaction from victims about feeling heard, as opposed to, not really knowing what's happening. People are just facing the cage, rather than facing the person that they hurt and coming to some healing. So we know for a fact that does not reduce crime. It makes it worse. And it's unfathomable to even think that a 14-year-old, we know that our brains aren't formed until we're 25. We want to put a child, and we know, the type of children that are being penalized as adults. And people that, were already marginalized, disenfranchised, didn't have the opportunity to enjoy childhood to begin with, and then to further oppress them. It's just, it's a human rights violation, and it's not effective.
Attorney Perloff, any thoughts?
Yeah, I share a lot of the concerns that Alexis raised. I mean, people, look, when some sort of criminal act happens, people really are upset, and there's often a lot of pain and harm, and I understand that, and I think a question we have to ask collectively is not just how to support the person to whom the crime occurred, but also to how to prevent things in the future. And you know, a lot of times I think the healing that you get that we can provide a lot more support for someone than locking up their offender, and we can do a lot more to prevent future crime than putting someone in a position where they're going to learn habits that will make them that might make them more likely to commit crime, or also lose the opportunity to cultivate skills that might make them have the opportunity to really contribute their full talents as an individual. And so when we think about what's most effective, I think from the standpoint of trying to support our victims and trying to prevent future criminal acts, this type of policy doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And a lot of our residents need to hear this information. So I'm going to turn it over now. So we have a few questions for Q&A. So I want to pose this to the entire panel, and then whoever wants to answer, please do. And then I will give closing remarks. So we have a question from a DC resident. Some of the bills that were introduced would let prosecutors try our kids as adults, as we just mentioned. How can DC residents push back on the narrative that DC youth are beyond redemption? And what legal or policy tools do we have to protect our youth? So it's a two-part question there. How can DC residents push back on the narrative that DC youth are beyond redemption? And what legal or policy tools do we have to protect them? Oh yeah, I see your hand.
Thank you so much, and I'm glad to answer this question. For the past few years, I've created a program called the Expungement Clinic, where we help returning citizens get their records cleared and really get that second chance at life. And one of the valuable tools that we have in DC is called the YRA, the Youth Rehabilitation Act, where based off of the age of the offense, folks are able to seal their records and be able to more or less get their records expunged. I mean, record sealing is our way of doing it in DC. So that's probably the best way to show people have changed their lives, regardless of how old they are. Being able to get that second chance really shows where opportunities lie in DC. In addition, regardless of people's expungement opportunities, the DC government hires a lot of returning citizens who have been now able to take care of their families, be able to afford to live in DC, and also be able to be positive role models to folks that were in those situations. So I think those are kind of two situations that could show that people can change their lives around, especially if they offended from a young age. And one of the things that Congress and the U.S. Attorney Aparo is really looking at is trying to address record sealing. They want to do away with it. And I believe that's a danger to our community because it really takes away people's chance to live the way they want to, have safe housing opportunities, have safe employment opportunities, and live a better way that's more comfortable for them and also comfortable for us. So I think in terms of the examples of people changing their ways, there's immense amounts of cases in DC that proves that. And if you go across the river, Maryland, and across to Virginia, they may not have those opportunities because they're not as many employment opportunities with the government as there are here in the district.
No, thank you, Oye, our shadow representative. Anyone else on this question? If not, I will move to our next question for the panel. I believe this would be directed towards our judges. This is a question from Linda. Judges, is my light just went off in my office. So it says, the question is, as I'm trying to get my light to come back on, judges are, with the courts being overwhelmed by new arrests and prosecutions, what does this mean for fairness and due process, especially for low-income residents who can't afford private counsel? So I'll ask that question again, with the judges saying how the courts are overwhelmed with new arrests and prosecutions. What does that mean for fairness and due process, especially for low-income residents who can't afford private lawyers?
I'll jump in really quickly. but it's not going to be on the criminal side. I'm going to let our experts respond to that one. But when Ms. Ford, when you start talking about our low income residents or moderate income residents and those who need to have greater access to justice, we just have to make a commitment to that. People ought to have the tools available to them to access courts and to raise whatever issues they think are appropriate. Earlier this year, our courts, including the Court of Appeals, we put forth a civil regulatory reform task force. And what we did is we, over the last several months, looked at options where we could try to provide greater services to people who are unrepresented, primarily on the civil side. Because on the criminal side, we have Gideon. And people come in, because of Gideon, will have representation. But we have taken a very critical look at how we can do better to make sure that unrepresented civil litigants have resources available to them that make their ability to access court and court services real and practical. And there's a document out there right now. You can go to our website. You can actually see the report of the task force and the recommendations that have put forth. There's a comment period that's open. It actually closes tomorrow, but don't let that deter you from telling us about whether it's a good program or it's not. Well, what you're going to see us do is we're going to implement some of those recommendations in the future so that people have greater access to court navigators, for example. We'll help them fill out paperwork, help them figure out what cause of action they really should be bringing. If you have to struggle with issues of service of process and you look at our rules, and it really does look like Greek to you because you didn't go to law school, or you did go to law school and it still looks like Greek to you, that we can actually make your ability to get service real for you. Those are the types of things that courts don't traditionally do, but because we're so committed in this jurisdiction to access to justice for all, it's the things that support our values. Those are the values of the District of Columbia. Those are the things that we'll always be committed to. And on the criminal side, I will let our judges just respond to that and praise our CJA lawyers and the Public Defender Service on both sides of the aisle here for the incredible work that they do for us.
Sure. I'll just add that on the criminal side, every person that gets arrested in the District of Columbia and ends up on our lockup list, meaning they're coming through our arraignment court on every single day except for Sundays, gets a lawyer, gets a court-appointed lawyer, either because it's a CJA, Criminal Justice Act public defender, or it's someone from our public defender service that Ms. Gardner mentioned earlier. So the district is unique that way, that the moment someone gets arrested and brought before the court, they get a lawyer at that time. In other jurisdictions, it's a little bit further into the process before that happens. But if you cannot afford a lawyer, which most of our clientele cannot, we appoint you a lawyer.
I'll also say, I think the fact that we have so many area law schools that have really excellent clinical programs, they also participate in providing defense for indigent clients as well.
Thank you. A darn good one. She said, we'll get you a lawyer and darn good ones. Might I add, darn good.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So another question came in for the panel, the death penalty. An executive order has been signed to reinstate the death penalty here in the district. And there was a question from an audience member. Will the 3 strikes or your outlaw come back? Will that factor in somehow to the way the death penalty is implemented? Somebody wants to take a strike at that ball I just threw, or take a swing at that ball I just threw, please do.
Yeah, it's really a federal court issue for the District of Columbia. I always hear people talk about the 3 strikes law. It's interesting, and this is where I think it's important just to kind of educate people broadly. That is not anything that's new. It's existed in the DC code as long as I have been in the District of Columbia practicing law over 40 years. It's just a function of what the code provides. It was enacted by our city council. It's available for the government to use in felony prosecutions here in the District of Columbia. And we do see it from time to time. But it's oftentimes, I think, a little bit of a misnomer to suggest that DC is soft on crime. There are judges here that they hand down sentences that are significant, and they're in response to the behavior that's before the court, and they're tools within the DC code that the government can use to try to enhance those sentences. We see it quite regularly.
And to be clear, this is from younger residents who don't know. They've never seen the death penalty, never. So, Alexis, since you're a federal public defender, can you speak to the death penalty coming to the, and if it's already here, why was there an executive order in the first place? I mean, I think some of us are confused by this.
I think that we don't have to worry about the death penalty being implemented. And this goes to, I mean, our strength is each other. Our strength is the people that are sitting in the jury box, people who do jury service. They're the ones protecting us from the powers that be. I'm sure people have seen the cases that have been coming out, and with this federal surge, and like you said, Paul Bryant, who I represent, it was a grand jury who refused to indict him on felony charges based on, some trumped up allegation that wasn't even recorded because, they thought, oh, he's a black man with a gun. And then when they realized, oh, he's a military officer, he's a lawyer, he has a permit to carry, when they just thought, he was in gym clothes, he's probably a felon with a gun. Well, then when they realized all that, it was like, oh, well, he threatened us. He threw his shoulder into mine. He assaulted us. And that man ended up spending several days in jail because also, because of the influx in cases, the judges were like, oh, well, I don't have any availability till next Tuesday from that Wednesday, which is crazy because you're supposed to be seen as immediately as possible. You're supposed to be brought to court. But he was just going to languish in jail for a week because of scheduling issues. I mean, it's just ridiculous. But my point was the people protect us. So a jury would have to unanimously decide to put someone to death, right? And it's not going to happen in this district. So they can try, they can go for their bills, but it's not going to happen. And so I encourage the people to take jury duty seriously. I know people always try to get off of jury duty. Everyone's busy, but it's so important. The people that want to be on jury duty are not usually jurors of our peers, are not, well, in DC, much more so, I will say. But a lot of times the people that are sitting in the seat who have their liberty on the line need the people that are trying to get off jury duty to stay on jury duty, and for so many reasons.
Ms. Ford, can I make a pitch for jury duty?
Oh, go ahead, Chief Judge. It's on you.
We actually have brand new space in the Superior Court set aside for jurors. It is a great space. I invite you all to come down and see it as often as we invite you to come down and see it. It's remarkable what we've done to make citizens more comfortable. We actually send you a text message and an email letting you know if you really have to come on the day that we need you. And if you come down, you're going to see this lovely space that we have. I encourage everybody to come down and visit.
I mean, if I can get a cappuccino while I'm in there, I'll come down, Chief.
Well, you call me.
Okay.
And can I just, there was just one issue with we were talking about the scheduling issues. In Superior Court, we have arraignment for it every day. And we clear our list every day. And we have prelims every day. And we clear our prelim list every day. I just wanted to make that clear.
Well, yeah, federal court's a little different, but the Superior Court is the people's court. And I know, and I've heard judges working and burning the midnight oil over there on their arraignment side to process cases. So I do appreciate Judge Dayson making that extension. that distinction. And I also want to say, I believe 3 strikes, just to clarify for that question, 3 strikes and you're out is no longer the law. And I don't think that's the law in the district. So just to make sure we answer that. So now I'm going to give closing remarks. I just want to thank you, Chief Judge Lee, Judge Dason, Judge Brandt, Jolly Good Ginger, Michael, Alexis, Oye. We just thank you all for your service, especially during the shutdown, people, and many of you are personally affected by this. And so I just thank you all for being with us tonight. Thank you to all of our panelists, all of our audience members who joined in on this important conversation. This is on YouTube Live. A link of a replay will go out, and some resources from our partner, National Police Accountability Project, will be sent to you via email with a Know Your Rights. It's a list of just know your rights informational, but little bullet point document that National Police Accountability Project put together, and also a document on how local officials and local residents can stand up in the midst of federal law enforcement deployment. So you will get those documents sent to you by email as an attendee. So I want everyone to leave with this. I want to leave on this note. Let's turn our frustration into focused energy for our city. Let's support our courts. Let's serve on jury. As a trial lawyer, juries mean everything to me. I wrapped up a jury trial this year in a very controversial case. It was a George Floyd era shooting, and the jury that we had came down with a verdict on July 31st. And it reminded me of why I do this work. It is very hard to work in the court system, whether you're a judge or whether you're a lawyer, especially when you're down 15 judges, as Chief Judge Lee mentioned. The court has 60 judges, 60 seats, but there are 15 vacancies, so that's hard. So it took me a 5-year press to get all the way to trial. And the jury that worked hard every day. And let me tell you something, it's supposed to be a 5-day trial. It was 8 days because of all kinds of delays. But the jury came and served every day. So we need DC residents to get on juries and serve. So I just want to thank everybody. You guys stay informed, support organizations that fight for DC statehood, justice reform, talk to your neighbors, your family, make sure you're getting legal advice. If you see things in the street that do not look right, please contact my office, contact the National Police Accountability Project, contact the Public Defender Service, as Alexis mentioned, even the ACLU. This is not the moment to stand still and feel, although we may feel terrorized, this is not at the time to be terrorized. This is the moment to stand up. So I just want to thank you, everyone, and let's keep pushing forward together. And if you know somebody who didn't attend tonight, please share the replay. God bless you all.